Okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Binge Boys podcast. I'm your host, Logan Lewis. We've got a guest today. Before we get into any of that, a little few housekeeping things before we get started. The What Are We podcast just launched today, hosted by myself and my good friend Lindsay, a podcast where we talk about dating and relationships, all that good stuff, all that fun stuff, user submitted questions and stories and all of that fun stuff for the first episode that just dropped today. And on Monday, we have an interview dropping with Alea from The Bachelor in Pilot Pete's season. So check that out. We talked to Alea last Saturday. She's really nice. She was really funny, and she sat down with us and talked to us, and we had a really good time. So be looking out for that. So my guest today is what would you describe yourself as? A media mogul?
I don't think I'm there yet. It's going to take me a few years to get there. I'll say this: I'm a veteran of the media game. I'll put it that way.
Media game,
a content game veteran.
Okay, that's very fair. So those of you who don't know, Brett works for a company who specializes in online media, whether it's social media, podcasting. They do Patreon stuff as well. I'm a pretty big fan of theirs. My roommate, I've even tuned my brother in. A lot of the people that are in my circle, I have turned on to these guys because there's not much to not like. They produce good stuff. So and they're called Washed Media. Do you want to just
Yeah. I'll kind of give the brief overlay. Washed Media is basically a network with the goal of making growing up a little less chaotic. So predominantly our audience is sort of the 23, 24-year-olds up to 35, 36 in Dylan's case, one of our hosts. But it's kind of the post-grad, after you're out of college and you have a little bit of money and you're 25, 26 looking for a new job or looking to buy a house. We kind of relate with that sort of group of people. Cultural stuff, pop culture, sports, pretty much, any topic that somebody that age would be interested in, dating, relationships, weddings. I mean, all kinds of things we kind of cover, and we try to do it with a little bit of a funny, snarky, elevated humor aspect to it. And I think part of the reason we've been successful with it is that people end up listening and they feel like they could be friends with the hosts, even though they might have never have met them. So. And like you said, I appreciate you getting your roommate involved and your brother involved, and
sure.
That's kind of the way we like to grow. Is word of mouth is the best way to get people on board.
Yeah, I agree. It's when trying to turn people on to you guys. So I listened to the guys sit back when Touching Base was a thing when they worked at Grand X, and people. When I tried to recommend that podcast to people, I had the same, I don't want to say difficulty when recommending Circling Back, but it's definitely like so what's the elevator pitch? And it's like, it's 3 or 4 guys that just talk about stuff for an hour every other day. And it just works. They just have something and it just works.
Yeah. I guess the best way I like to describe it is it's like happy hour with your best friends a couple times a week.
Yep.
When you're sitting down at a bar, at a table with 3 or 4 of your coworkers. Maybe they're not your best friends, but they're close enough that you get the office gossip, you get the what's going on in sports. Somebody will bring up a funny tweet. So it's really a happy hour, and we put a mic in front of everybody. And for some reason, I think it has something to do with the chemistry and something to do with kind of the niche that we're in. It just works. And yeah, it's like 3.5 guys drinking beers at a bar in the corner. That's kind of how the 30-second pitch to it. And,
sure.
And it takes 4 or 5 episodes to get in, but once you do, I was the same way. I started listening to Touching Base and back when I was at Barstool, and I couldn't not listen every week. I just felt like I was buddies with the guys, and it turned into this.
Yeah. So I've got some questions, man. You answered a few of them the other day on, I think it was Monday's episode when Dylan was out. Where you stepped in and you said you were a finance major in college. So
yeah.
how did that, did you like work an internship and realize finance wasn't your thing? Did you graduate with a finance degree and then just use your resume and experience to just get your foot in the door or elsewhere? Like how'd that work out? How'd you get to Barstool, I guess is my overarching question.
Sure. So I went to Northeastern University up in Boston, and they do this thing called a co-op program, which is basically for 6 months out of the year, either January to June or July to December, you're working basically full time. It's a paid full-time job that you're doing 40 hours a week. Now, you can live on campus in Boston and do it, or we had kids go to China and India and London and all kinds of places to do co-ops with, whether it's like a Goldman Sachs or an HSBC, kind of that, banking and marketing, all kinds of stuff. But I ended up doing mine with the Denver Broncos in their scouting department. I kind of reached out to every team in the league one summer, and I was actually on my first co-op reaching out to teams, and I did my first co-op with a finance company. And I thought I wanted to be the Wall Street guy. I thought I wanted to be the hedge fund guy. I was really kind of dead set on that coming out of high school. And then I did it for 6 months, and I was like, fuck this. Can I swear on this? I'm sorry.
You can totally swear. Don't worry.
So yeah, 6 months later, I was like, man, this sucks. I do not want to do this for the rest of my life. And ended up getting a job or internship co-op with the Broncos, and did that for 6 months. And kind of expected to keep doing it after I graduated. And, when that opportunity kind of fell through after I graduated, I was like, oh, fuck, I don't really have anything that I want to do besides scouting. And that turned into like, well, maybe I'll do real estate, or maybe I'll do, corporate finance somewhere. And the Barstool job popped up one day because Eric Nardini, their CEO, tweeted, I need somebody to like feed Big Cat and somebody to keep an eye on the shenanigans, or something that goes along those lines. And I didn't know what the job was. I sent an email with my resume and got a call, did like a video interview, with one of the guys there, and ended up working out. And so office manager Brett was born after that. And then spent a couple of years there and worked, did office manager for a year, and then did content programming for a year, which was kind of the scheduling of tweets and scheduling of original content and whatnot. And then made my way into like the sales and marketing department, which I ended up loving. And that's kind of, I had known about the guys at Touching Base. I'd known about Grand X. I was a PGP and TFM reader way back in the day. Mm-hmm. And kind of knew about the guys from that. And when you're at Barstool, you have a little bit of an amplified Twitter presence, I guess. And so we followed each other at some point. And then when Dylan and Dave got let go, I was actually, I DM'd with Dylan and Dave because I'd known them through intern Klein, who is a character on the Wash Media Network. And so through that connection, I had kind of known them outside of the Barstool world. And so my initial thought was to get them to Barstool. I was like, these guys would be great. I want their podcast on the network. And I guess, they ended up kind of flirting with Barstool. Nothing ever came of it. But after that, and after seeing what they started at Washed, I was sort of dead set at some point on becoming a member of that team. And, I was really happy at Barstool. Like 3 years, I will never, ever take back. And I was treated, behind the scenes, I was treated fantastically. And you might see something different if you Google my name. But it was really the perfect stepping stone for getting to Washed. And then things kind of aligned from there, and ended up kind of talking to Dylan in August of 2019. And the rest is sort of history. Ended up here down in Texas.
Yeah. My initial thought was when I heard that, when that whole like shift in Grand X happened, and I know I think Micah was let go at one point, or Micah quit maybe. I know Will quit once Washed kind of started up, and Dylan and Dave got let go, as well as like a bunch of other people. Like no one was talking about it. They weren't like public about it. And I was thinking, they'll be fine. They'll probably end up just going to work at Barstool, because like when I think of like two big, like if you want to say like, I know Barstool does more than like college content, but like you said, Washed does. Washed has content that is directed at a certain age group, and I think Barstool does too.
Sure.
So I was like, when I think of the two giants in that realm, I think of Barstool and TFM or Grand X or whoever you want to, maybe Old Row, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Like there was that kind of that sweet spot from like 20 14 to 15 when TFM was really popping. Barstool was just starting to kind of become this behemoth. Those were the two kind of giants in the space.
Yeah.
And Barstool decided to go this route of, and they're like, Dave Portnoy is an absolute genius. And so is Erica, so is Big Cat. I mean, the talent they have there is absolutely ridiculous, and how hard they work. And it's a testament to, where they're at now. But they decided to kind of lean into the video and the sports kind of betting, and that angle just kind of launched them into the stratosphere. And TFM, to their credit, they still have 1 million followers on Twitter, and PGP is another one of those things that kind of spawned the Touching Base podcast. So that was no failure at all. It just kind of, things behind the scenes didn't go perfectly, and you ended up where you're at. But really a testament to both of those companies building those brands in the early, 2010, 2011, 2012 days.
What's funny? Complete side note. When the boys first started making fun of you for saying both, I through and through was yelling in my car, I understand, because my family is originally from both my parents were born in Illinois, and I was born in Illinois as well. And just my entire life I had said both until I met a girl down here in Atlanta, and I think one day I said both, and she was like, both. And every time I said it, she just said it to the point where I trained myself to just stop saying it, because I was tired of people calling me out on saying, adding the L before the TH. It was horrible.
Dude, what's funny? I never noticed it. And I think that's probably a product of upstate New York. I never knew anything was not that it's wrong to say it that way, but I just never noticed it. And then down here, my girlfriend does the same thing. She's like, both. I'm like, yep. Oh, and the guys do it every time. It's kind of funny, but I didn't. And now, every time I say it, I catch myself.
Oh, and every time you say it, I'm on the pod, I'm waiting for one of them to say both. It's to the point where I've even noticed, my mom. I'm like, hey, Mom, you ever notice that you say both, right? And she's like, no. I'm like, apparently, there's a lot of people in our shoes.
Right, and you'd think Will would understand, being from up there, and he's like, it's both. I'm like, oh man. But yeah, and then it's funny. I've gone back to Saratoga a few times now since that whole both thing started happening, and everybody's both. Same thing in Boston. It's kind of funny to see. I'm like, okay, so I'm not terribly wrong.
Yeah, totally. So when you started working at Barstool, I know Barstool and TFM probably have the reputation of being I don't want to call them party brands, but like I said earlier, they're associated with when I see Barstool content or TFM content, I think of partying or college. Or when you graduate college and go to work for a company like that, was anybody ever were your parents ever skeptical, or why are you going to work for a company that has that kind of brand? Was anybody ever like that towards you?
I get my mom definitely was. My mom had she, if you go to barstoolsports.com in 2016, it's a very different site than it is today.
Right.
And my dad was actually kind of not a fan, but knew the brand, and I had showed him some PMT episodes before I got hired, and so he was like, "Oh, this is cool." It's the way me and my buddies would have talked if I was your age, today. And so no, it was. I was really excited, and I was employee number 20 something, 23 or 24 at that point. And I was the youngest person in that office, if you can believe that. So I get there, I'm expecting there to be beer cans all over the place. I'm expecting there to be this party atmosphere. And no, it's just everybody head down doing the work, and everybody's 28, 29, 30 at that point. And it's a real company. And so that was kind of not surprising, but sort of refreshing to kind of come in and see that even though they're sort of a party brand and they put out party related content, at their core, it's just a business with a bunch of hardworking people.
Yeah, it's still a business, and they still have to keep the lights on. So maybe you do have a ping pong table in the back room, but people are still grinding for 9 out of the 10-hour work days, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah, even longer than that. People would get in, probably a little later than a normal job, between 10 and 11. but people stayed till 6, 7, 8 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd end up, the office was so fun, especially initially because there was room before we had like 1 million people in that place.
Mm-hmm.
When there was room, we played like cornhole, we played, beer die, beer pong, and we had the TVs all set up. So people would just work and then right into watching, whatever 7 o'clock hockey game or 7 o'clock basketball tip was on. You'd have 10, 12 guys that would just hang out afterwards. And so it sort of amplified that family atmosphere where you really didn't want to leave the office. And even though it was, a kind of a fun place after dark, you still got your work done in order to be able to do that. So
sure. Yeah. So oddly enough, so the other day I got lost in the YouTube wormhole and I was just watching videos. And one of my suggested video was a video of like Portnoy interviewing like potential interns or something. And oddly enough, like you're in the video, and it was like,
oh yeah,
it was like short-haired Brett. And initially I was like, that looks like Brett, but I was like, nah, he doesn't have the hair. There's no way that's Brett. And it was you. So I was wondering, since you're so heavily involved with like the happy hours that Wash does, as well as just being stand-ins or an extra voice on the mic whenever the boys need it or want you, it seems like it was completely natural for you. Were you involved with like, because I know Barstool has several podcasts that they offer and produce and whatnot. So was it something that you ever dipped your toes in when you were there, or did you just kind of step into the fold at Washed and it just worked for you as well?
Yeah, I think so. I never did content at Barstool outside of like sort of being content adjacent. There's a couple people there, All Business Pete, for example, that kind of just get nudged into the content game, whether they want to be or not. I never wanted to be. But once I was there at a time when there was only content people there. There really wasn't much of a business team. There really wasn't much of a product team or marketing team. I was sort of the behind the scenes, like do it all, gopher business guy, along with being the office manager and Erica's assistant at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just got to create relationships with all the content guys. Like I would go have beers with Riggs and Kevin and Feidelberg and K Marco across the street. He got me into Old Fashions, for example. Like just kind of being adjacent and talking to those guys, especially outside the office when we could be at a bar or just having dinner or something like that, got me into the mindset where I took, content skills from them and kind of saw the way they talked and the way they made conversation, the way they were able to put their words together to make something funny and entertaining. And then once I kind of got into more of the content marketing side of things and was building pitch decks and was being creative with the guys, that was a huge help for me because I could, a lot of the times the salespeople at Barstool get scared to like go talk to Big Cat. Mm-hmm. And they just don't know him. And he's this giant celebrity, where I'd been there for years and I could go and be like, hey, Dan, can we talk about this? And he'd be like, of course. Yeah. But it was able to, so being around those guys and the creativity and the girls like Rhea, Fran, they're a phenomenal combo. Being around everybody kind of got me in the mindset where I was starting to think more content, not necessarily wanted to be a part of the content, but had ideas like, hey, y'all should do this, sort of a producer, if you will. Yeah. Like if you guys should cover this, or you guys should do this road trip. And it was fun to see some of those ideas come to life. Like the Barstool Classic, for example, was something Riggs and I talked about over multiple beers at multiple times. And it's fun to see where he took that thing because it's so successful. But just got him being around the guys and being around the girls and getting involved in their content made me, I think, ready, I guess, to be put on a mic and talking about this and that and the other thing.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. It always seemed like when, a lot of people, or at least myself, when I heard that they were bringing in another guy and he was going to be on the mic more, I was like, at first I was like, is he going to, no offense, like upset the trio, or is he going to be a bull in the china shop type thing? But no, you got in there and you killed it initially, like, and
mm-hmm.
still do. And I was like, man, that this kid knows what he's gotten. But then, once they gotten into, he worked at Barstool, I just assumed that you did content for them before learning about you over the course of, however long you've been with Washed at this point.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, the guys have been great. Like, it's kind of one of those roles where obviously the three of them are so talented and work so well together. That was my a concern of mine too. Like, I don't want to come in and mess up this mojo. And so you just kind of have to pick your spots and be the quiet kind of fourth mic producer sort of role. And if they need something, be there for it. If you have eventually I was kind of confident and comfortable enough to jump in at certain points. But they've been phenomenal to me, and they're just a phenomenal trio. Not only in what they do, but off the mic too. I mean, they are exactly how you guys all think they are. Just really, really good dudes. And I think that kind of rubs off in their content. You can kind of tell.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Damn, I had a really good follow-up to that. Oh, so earlier you mentioned briefly about how like you had DM'd back and forth with Dylan and you were kind of cool with Dave as well. Was it maybe going back to the parent question again, were you or anybody you knew in your life was like skeptical, like, hey, Brett, you're leaving this behemoth that is Barstool, that is pretty much one of the biggest internet companies out there right now, and you're about to leave it and go work with three other dudes in Austin, Texas at a small media startup? Were you like ever scared, or were you just like confident in these three guys that they had what it takes and you were going to be A-okay?
Yeah, honestly, like looking back now, I probably should have been scared. Knowing what I know now, but no, I never had that feeling. And a lot of my friends who, maybe even if they weren't diehard Barstool fans, were just like, dude, like, what are you thinking? You are set here. And I could have sat at the same desk doing my same thing for another 10 years and made a great salary and been happy.
Mm-hmm.
But I was kind of ready. The Barstool is a funny thing where it's sort of like dog years. 3 years at Barstool feels like 15 years in your personal life. And that's part of the reason they're so successful is because it's 24/7 nonstop.
Right.
But it got to a point where I was ready to get out of New York. I hated living in Manhattan.
Right.
I missed being from upstate New York, you miss the nature, you miss the outdoors, I miss driving. So I was just so ready to get out of New York, and my apartment, I had to walk up 5 flights of stairs to get to every day. And I was, living in a room that was 10 by 8 and I'm like, just not comfortable. And honestly, I just did see something in these guys that watched that reminded me of Barstool in like 2014, 15, right? Just kind of this ready, like this crazy, dedicated niche audience ready to sort of explode. And I told myself, do you want to be comfortable in what you're doing? And do you want to be sitting here doing your thing and kind of never really making it to where you want to be? Or do you want to take a chance? And I couldn't forgive myself if, say, I didn't do that and they had kind of taken off. So it was sort of one of those leaps of faith that I look back on now, and I'm so glad I did it.
So also, kind of switching gears to a different side of things. So I've always noticed this, and I wondered if maybe you know the answer. Maybe you don't, but we'll see. So kind of like how we did at the beginning of this pod, and a lot of podcasts do this, either at the beginning or the end or both. They have, housekeeping, follow this, follow that, follow this, follow that. Circling Back doesn't really do that. They don't really, they, with the occasional like at DC Ruff on Instagram or whatever, they'll plug themselves organically, but like, are they just confident in the fact that like, if people want to follow, they'll follow, and they don't really care about the social media following? Or is it because they do that niche, like, at D like that, they plug themselves organically throughout the episodes? Like, is there a strategy there, or is it just, again, another organic thing that just works?
Yeah, I think it's kind of more of an organic thing. We probably could do more promotion, honestly, like in episode of like, hey, listen to this Sunday Scaries episode, or listen to this mail-in episode. We probably could cross promote more than we do. And it's sort of just part of what makes the show so special is that it really just is this conversation that you would have at a bar. And the run sheets we have are like the first 3 things are like intro the guest or intro whoever. And then it's just topics and ad reads. And it's just crazy how well it flows. And we just haven't had the need to plug stuff like that. And you know what's funny is our like you looked at the followers for Circling Back on Twitter and Instagram, and compared to like our downloads, it's a crazy difference. So it's cool to know that there are people out there who couldn't care less about a Circling Back podcast tweet that just listen to the show for their own kind of personal liking. And so that's kind of cool too. So, but I mean, we'd like to convert them to followers or whatever. But then again, if you're a 31-year-old dude who doesn't really care about Instagram or Twitter or whatever, you're just kind of going to listen to the podcast, and that's fine. Yeah. But one of my goals is to increase those followings. And, we talk about widening the funnel at the top of the Circling Back sort of network. And that's because we have this crazy, awesome niche audience, and we'd like to introduce more people to that feeling in that community.
Gotcha. So relating to that, so you are the quote unquote office manager, Brett, for Washed as well. What exactly, no offense, like what is your day to day when you're not on the mic with them? What are you like? I've never understood, like, are y'all working? Obviously, maybe not right now just because of the circumstances with COVID and everything, but are y'all just on your laptops at home? Just what do you do? Like, what is your day to day like? Like,
So, I mean, I was originally hired basically to take the ad sales portion of things off of their hands. And so really simply, that's emailing every agency we work with and emailing every brand we work with and making sure they're happy, making sure, they're trying to facilitate that from an account manager standpoint. And then there's like the kind of the flip side of that, which is looking for new business, building out a deck was one of the first things I wanted to do when I got here, that kind of showed brands exactly who we were. Right. And kind of, whenever you see an Instagram story of something that, like a sponsored one, like, oh, that product makes sense for our audience.
Yeah.
And kind of getting into developing business. Honestly, business development is sort of my title. And so you see that with things like Manscaped and Bird Dogs that we've been doing the last couple of weeks that are totally these organic partnerships that I've gone out and kind of hunted down in a way. And that's kind of what I love doing is telling the story of these guys to brands and telling the story of our audience to these brands, that I'm like, hey, you're not going to find a more engaged audience, even though, we might not be doing PMT numbers, but I'll put our audience, pound for pound up against those kind of podcasts any day. So that's kind of one half of it. And then the other half is thinking about kind of the strategy, where are we going? What do we have here? Do we want to do new stuff? And a lot of my time is spent thinking that we have this great audience, but how do we grow it? And so you kind of build this like year-long timeline and this roadmap of where I'd like Washed Media to be, and be able to monetize that and be able to grow that. And then it's kind of getting the guys on board with that vision. And they've had this, this thing where they're sort of scared to have Wash turn into what happened at Grand X. And I get that. There's like this PTSD sort of deal there, but they also appreciate the outside perspective and kind of the different thought process from somebody who's seen a company like Barstool go from 20 employees to 200 in 3 years. So a lot of my time is spent thinking about ad sales. A lot of my time is spent thinking about programming and how we can be better, what we need, what could we use from a new podcast perspective, and how to grow our Patreon. So in a way, it's sort of like merch development, audience development, business development, kind of wrapped into one, are sort of my day-to-day. Always something to work on, that's for sure.
Yeah, cool. Last business question before we get into the quintessential Binge Boys fun questions, or say. I was wondering this the other day. I didn't plan on asking you this, but it just popped into my head. So you guys started out and you had Circling Back. That was always going to be a thing. Some kind of form of touching base was going to be a thing. As well as, I know right before, I'm pretty sure maybe like a couple weeks or a month before Dylan and Dave got laid off, is when Dylan was given the mailbag, I think it was, at Grand X. And then Will has always had Sunday Scaries for as long as whenever. But then y'all acquired Club Cool. What was that like? I know wasn't Barrett also a Grand X personality as well? How did that work out? Because I know, like, you've kind of dipped into like, well, why Club Cool and not Ross, Ross's stuff, or why this, why not that? So how did the Club Cool thing come together? I've always just been curious.
Yeah, I think it was before my time from like an acquisition standpoint. So I don't know exactly how it came together, but I do know that Barrett's always been good buddies with the guys. And that sort of, it just kind of came into that. Barrett had the IP for Club Cool that he got from Grand X and wanted to continue doing the podcast, but couldn't really commit to a full-time, we couldn't really pay him full-time at that point because we weren't big enough yet. So we were like, hey, let's, from what I know about the situation, kind of was like, hey, if we'll take a percentage of your ad deals, you can have the rest and you can have the IP, and we'll just kind of monetize it and promote it as part of our network. So it's a model that a lot of companies have. Barstool has it sometimes where they acquire a podcast and take a piece of their ad revenue, or they generate new stuff from within. Sure. But that's kind of on the Club Cool angle, something that I want to continue doing going forward. Once we have a little bit of capital and we have a little bit of momentum and know where we want to be as a network, getting more podcasts like a Club Cool, like a Ross Bolin, like, I can't speak to acquiring Ross or anything, but I know he's obviously good friends with the guys, and he's got a good thing going for himself at Bolin Media and with his Patreon and whatnot. So, but it's always nice to have options, whether it's him or guys from that do hockey podcasts that I know, or do girls especially. We'd love to have a girl podcast, a female podcast, female perspective podcast at some point. So it's kind of all over the board in terms of our podcast network capability, because we have such a big audience that's both male and female, and such a big audience that likes different stuff, but kind of has that same backbone of being a post-grad millennial kind of person that's trying to figure out life as they go. So long story short, long-winded way of saying that we're looking to grow, and we've loved what Barrett's done with Club Cool, and we'll always be keeping an eye out for new podcast assets and new video assets and new editorial assets at some point. So it's a fun place to be in right now.
Yeah, I can tell. So we'll switch gears and we'll get into the fun stuff, the quintessential stuff that I ask pretty much everybody that I'll interview on this podcast. The entertainment questions, because this is a entertainment podcast at the end of the day. Even though sometimes we don't talk about entertainment, it all circles back. But me and the other hosts, and basically everybody in our circle is either a fan of TFM or Washed or Barstool or all three. So it all works out. So Brett, what if you can nail one down, what's your favorite movie ever?
Favorite, and this may be a cliche answer. It's Wedding Crashers. It is the movie. I know people make fun of it. I know it's like, oh, you watch The Office too, huh? But Wedding Crashers is my favorite movie, and I can throw it on and laugh at it and watch it every day. And it's just, I can quote the whole thing, and for some reason, that whole movie kind of comes together for me. And I just, one of those movies that kind of makes you feel good. Those nostalgic movies that you can throw on. And there's a couple of them that I'd love. Like anytime you see Shooter on TNT go across the TV, that's a must. You stick with that one. The Patriot, Independence Day is another one for me. But it's that type of movie that I really gravitate towards, and Wedding Crashers is definitely number one for me.
Yeah, it's like a coming of age. It just makes you feel good when you watch it. That's funny. I don't know if you've ever brought that up on circling back or not, but I did not see that one coming. I thought you were going to say something along the lines of like American Pie or I don't know, maybe something like Breakfast Club or something like that.
Yeah, I mean those are classics too. Like you said, the coming of age ones, like Out Cold is another one that I just love. American Pie, love. The boys got me to watch Can't Hardly Wait for the first time, and really enjoyed that one. So obviously, like the old schools of the world, that era is so good. 2000 to 2007, 2008, when you had Step Brothers and whatnot. is so talented, with Farrell in his prime and Vince Vaughn in his prime.
Right. Yeah.
Those are you can watch any of those movies over and over again, but Wedding Crashers kind of takes the cake for me, just from a quote standpoint.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's always a pretty good measured. Like, my favorite movies are definitely movies that I could quote start to finish. Happy Gilmore, Dumb and Dumber, stuff like that. Just you could throw it on and put a blindfold on me, and I could probably recite the whole thing.
100%. And something that, like, an inside joke with your buddies in the group text is a line from that movie, or
Sure.
Your fantasy football team growing up was always called, like, what if crab cakes and football or something, like it's that's what it's just stuff like that really sticks with you. And yeah, just kind of one of those movies that makes you feel good watching it.
Yeah, I hear you, man, 100%. So along the movie sideline, what about Disney movies? We've all got at least millennials, or whatever you want to call us. We all grew up with, like, those classic animated Disney flicks. Do you have a favorite?
Hercules.
Wow.
Number one. I loved that movie, and I can't, like, explain it. I'm a fan of all of them, Lion King and Jungle Book, and every animated Disney movie, is okay in my mind. But Hercules, I remember just putting it on. Like, remember the fucking VHS things you used to have to rewind and
go to the thing in, and you had to twist it around.
Exactly. Yeah, you go to Blockbuster and snag 3 or 4 movies in the sleeves you used to pull them out of. But Hercules, I had on as much as I did. It was weird. I had, like, Top Gun on all the time too, as like a 6, 7, 8-year-old.
Yeah.
I just remember watching Top Gun and loving it. And but Hercules was always up there for me as far as Disney movies go.
That's dope. How do you feel about Disney making a live action Hercules remake, as they've done the past couple of years, with Lion King and Jungle Book and some of their more popular IPs? I saw the other day that I think the directors of the new, Endgame, the Avengers movie, are supposed to do Hercules live action.
No shit. This is news to me. I haven't heard this yet.
Yes, this is my breaking news, Brad.
This is Logan's breaking news.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Is there like a word on who the lead is or anything?
You got to think that it's there's no leads. I think they're just writing scripts right now, but you got to think maybe Chris Hemsworth, or for Hercules. I don't know. Do you have a dream casting if for the cast of this movie? I think Will Arnett would be a good Hades.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect casting.
So, just like a sarcastic douchebag, which is what Hades is, and Will Arnett just has that comedy style.
Oh, 100%. I'm gonna go Natalie Portman for her. I think she'd be fantastic. And maybe, like, I'm trying to think of, like, because he's kind of has, like, reddish hair and the Greek look to him. So I'm trying to think of like a Ben Askren UFC type of actor who, you can make him as manly and as bulky as a Chris Hemsworth, but also kind of has that, like, boyish face in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a dream casting. That's a great question.
That's a tough one, because the obvious answer would be something like John Cena or The Rock, or just someone that's just obscenely muscular, because that's what Hercules is just obscenely muscular.
Right.
I've heard rumors of, like, a kind of an Avengers reunion with Chris Hemsworth as Hercules and Scarlett Johansson as her.
I mean, you can't go wrong with that.
No, you can't get enough ScarJo.
No, never.
So
I still love your Will Arnett Hades thing. I think that's like too perfect.
Yeah, I came up with that the other day when we were discussing it on this show, and I thought, dude, Will Arnett. I can't think of anybody else now that I name Will Arnett.
I know. It's like with what they did with Lion King, with Timon and Pumbaa being Seth Rogen and Billy Eichner, and then John Oliver being Zazu. That's 3 of the most perfect castings. I think. Easy. And say what you want about the movie, but those 3 castings you can't get better than that.
What'd you think of the movie?
It was fine. It did its job. It was good. I enjoyed it. It's not going to blow your socks off, I guess. I just don't think you can recapture the magic of what they had. And you can try, and maybe it's a money grab in a way, but like,
yeah, you know,
I don't know.
Lion King was my favorite all-time animated Disney movie, and you can make the argument that it might have been a money grab just because what Jon Favreau did with Jungle Book was amazing, and I thought the Jungle Book was really good. But then I think he maybe just was like, clearly this live action animal stuff, CGI shit, it works. So let's just take the most beloved, or one of the most beloved animal movies of all time, and just make it 100%. I still can't believe that that's 100% CGI. Like it's just imagine 20 years from now what they're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, it is stunning, but don't get me wrong. It is an absolutely stunning movie, but it just kind of lacks the certain magic of the animated one. And it's it's tough to recreate one of the most beloved movies of all time.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree. So switching gears to more, I don't want to say serious, but so we've all been trapped in quarantine for a while. Atlanta's, for the most part, at least trying to open back up. They've lifted a lot of the stuff. Throughout this quarantine, has there been any docu-series or just series in general that you sat down and told yourself at the beginning of this thing, like, okay, during quarantine, I'm going to watch this, hopefully finish it? What you've been watching lately? Anything out of this world? I know you guys discussed Epstein. Me and the guys talked about that last week. Yeah, what you been watching, man?
Yeah, so going into quarantine, I've never really been like a crazy TV guy, if that's fair. I've done Game of Thrones was about the only thing I followed like religiously.
Sure.
But I watched a few episodes of Breaking Bad. I watched a few episodes of Sons of Anarchy, a few episodes of Narcos. I've never been like in on movies and series, excuse me. And but Succession, Billions, and I rewatched Letterkenny, which is like a Canadian Trailer Park Boys on Hulu, and it's fantastic. But I kind of sat down and watched Succession from start to finish. I've watched 5 seasons of Billions now and love every second of that series. And I've been huge on remember Planet Earth, the David Attenborough series?
Hell yeah.
That's like what I do every night before I go to bed. Is pop on one of those, and
perfect.
You're living. Like a little glass of whiskey and Planet Earth on.
Dude, it's so incredible.
Yeah, but so that's really been, and I've been so tempted to go to Target and get a PS4 and just go to town on Call of Duty or FIFA or something like that. But I know if I did, I would be so addicted to it. I would just never get off the thing.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because my next question was going to be the PS4 thing about. So you talked about getting the PS4 several times. I think a few weeks ago, maybe you said, I'm kind of over it. Did you think, were you ever like a gamer growing up, or was that just like in a situation where it's like, okay, I'm trapped indoors for 3 months, might as well go buy a video game console?
Yeah, I was never really a huge gamer growing up. I had I just kind of got, I'm not in it to it late, but I had a GameCube and I never had an N64. And then I had an Xbox 360, and that was about my max. Was playing Call of Duty, Modern Warfare on Xbox 360.
Yeah.
And then in college, my roommate he had a PS4, and so I kind of got more into it in college. But I've never really had the itch to play until 4 a.m. type of thing. If I played, it would be an hour, or I'd play a couple games of Madden and jump off, or I'd play a couple games of Shell and jump off. But I think I would have pulled the trigger this quarantine if I hadn't. I was basically at my girlfriend's parents' house for a month, and that allowed me to kind of get my mind off. If I was in my apartment the whole time, I would have pulled the trigger for sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm glad you didn't, because the whole time that you've been talking about buying a PS4, and even when Dylan was talking about buying a PS4, I was screaming at my mic, and I'm sure some people reach out to you guys on Twitter, and I was like, guys, in 2 months, the new PlayStation 5 will be released, and the new Xbox. In fact, I think it's Thursday, they're announcing the hardware and the games that's coming out on PS5 this holiday season.
No shit. Is there any what's the leak behind? Is there anything good?
They've announced what the controller looks like. Basically, like this, it literally looks like a gun that you'd see in like Star Trek. It's like this white, glowy. It basically looks like like if you look at the Google image of it, you'll be like, that looks fake because it's so like futuristic looking that it looks fake. It looks photoshopped, but there's not much. There's nothing been confirmed yet. They've pretty much, same with Xbox, kept everything pretty tight under wraps. Obviously with COVID, E3, the big gaming convention, that usually that they would have announced the new consoles by now, it got shut down this year because of coronavirus. So that's why I guess Sony's having their little private event on Thursday. But
this is the sound of me buying Sony and Microsoft stock right now ahead of that event.
Dude, my group chat with all my buddies has been blowing up all week, especially with like airline stock like Delta. Like a bunch of us went and got some Delta stuff when it was really low.
Oh yeah.
I've never been a big I have never been a stock guy until until I listened to the episode where you guys talked about stonks. that day I like texted my dad and was like, hey, can we talk about stocks? I know nothing about stocks. And that's what turned into him going like, oh, I just got this Robinhood app, you should download it, they'll give you a free stock. Of course they gave me AMC, which is a movie theater that just filed for bankruptcy. just filed for bankruptcy. So
oh no,
love my 60-cent stock there. But yeah, man, we've been blowing up all week talking about stocks.
Yeah, it's something that's like, I've always loved stocks. I've always loved the market. I've always loved not necessarily playing the market, but just like doing the research and before I got into scouting, pro football players, I'd like to think of myself as I was scouting stocks. I would do like these write-ups here and there, and I loved it. But that's kind of turned into me talking about it with the guys more because, that Will doesn't know a lot about it. Dylan doesn't know anything about it. Yeah. And we've been texting back and forth. But like something like that with guys like you and myself and the podcast guys, it'd be so valuable to have something on our website that kind of talks you through stocks or talks about picks and have a business related podcast. So that's one of those things that just like constantly in my brain about how to grow washed media is like, okay, well, what if we did stock talk, but like for 26, 27-year-olds who don't have a business degree, but also appreciate a little bit more of like an elevated or educated conversation on it. So we'll see. But that's the last few weeks have definitely piqued our interest in sort of the stock market trading world.
Oh yeah. I think stocks belongs in that category of like things that they should have taught you in either college, like it should have been a mandatory, like before you graduate class, or like even in high school, like how to do taxes, how to negotiate buying a car, all this stuff that if I didn't have my dad, like, I don't know where the hell I'd be.
Yeah, dude, like same, like the life skills, not necessarily like how to boil water or whatever, but like how to negotiate for a car, like you said, how to buy stocks, how to do your taxes, how to like save for like how much does a wedding cost? I didn't know until this year. I was like, oh shit, it's not like $2,500.
Yeah, it's
times 10.
Yeah, exactly. Like last weekend, one of my buddies was saying like, yeah, I got this new mattress for X and X amount of dollars. And I was like, is that good? Like, yeah. I don't know how much buying a mattress costs. Cause I just, took the one that my parents gave me when I moved out of the house. So
right. Exactly.
I bought a new truck last March of last year. And, like I was sitting there with my dad and I was like, Dad, I would have not known to ask that question. He was like, why? He's like, you don't know this stuff? I'm like, Dad, they don't teach you this shit in school. I don't know if they used to, but they don't anymore.
No, absolutely. So there's so much value in something that could be created, knock on wood, maybe we can do it. But with something like that sort of teaches you how to grow up and how to be 23, 24 and living on your own, because a lot of that shit, you just kind of have to figure it out. And
100%.
They don't teach you. So
I hate that because if you would have thrown me at this car dealership and been like, negotiate this vehicle, my car payment would probably be $300 higher than it is right now.
Exactly. And then like on that same note, how to get a loan for your car. Like
God,
It's like, dude, what's an APR on my car? It's like,
what's an interest rate? Like
2% good? Is 9% good? Like what? Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of value in teaching people like our age how to do that shit because you know what? Frankly, maybe people want to take advantage of us. So that's why nobody does teach us.
Hey, that's probably honestly why.
It's like, oh yeah, we'll give you a mortgage at like 6%. There you go.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, my dumb ass is like, oh, okay, that sounds great. 6%, that's really low.
100%. Oh yeah, we're good. No, can't wait.
Cool, man. So the last pillar of the entertainment talk is the music. I know you're really vocal about the music that you like on the pod, especially Dave Matthews Band, which is hilarious because my dad listened to the shitload of a Dave Matthews Band when I was growing up. Whenever people ask me what my childhood was like, I tell them Matchbox 20, Google Dolls, Creed, and Dave Matthews Band. That's all my dad listened to, so that's all that's ever in my head.
And there's that's a solid catalog across the board there. You have some jams. I remember Matchbox 20 and Goo Goo Dolls came to Saratoga together and played a concert one night. And it was there people from like 4 years old to 40 something years old had a blast. But yeah, Dave Matthews, probably because he came to Saratoga so often, 2 nights a year, I kind of got into him around freshman year of high school and never looked back. I mean,
no,
I think I know if he has 150 songs in his catalog, I think I could sing every single one of them.
Sure.
So that's just kind of been like growing up in upstate New York, suburban, white kid. That was our anthem was Dave Matthews Band. And along with that, we did a lot of like John Mayer is kind of my, if I'm listening by myself, in my apartment, I'll blast John Mayer. But like, I've always been kind of into the jam bands, whether it's a Twiddle or a Fish or even a little bit of Grateful Dead. I don't know enough about them, but
sure.
Stuff like that, just kind of, and then classic rock. I went through a huge like Southern rock phase, CCR and Marshall Tucker Band and that kind of stuff in college. Allman Brothers Band, like just nonstop playing that. And I just, the only thing I've never really been into is like hip hop and rap. And even when my buddies got into it, it never connected with me.
I was just going to ask, I know Dylan and Will and Dave every once in a while give like a thug plug or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it just never got to you. I mean,
it just, the only time it did was when we were playing football. And because football, like 2008 to 2012, when I was playing football, was like Drake at kind of his peak. And that kind of stuff was hitting. But by then, and I was playing hockey in the winter, hockey had already kind of switched over to like the EDM stuff, the Aviciis of the world. And so where it used to be rap in those locker rooms, it kind of became the electronic, like, fist bumping music. And same kind of thing with like baseball we always did classic rock or CCR or something like that on the bus. So
sure,
it was only football was the only sport that we had that kind of got us jacked up listening to rap. And so I did enjoy it then, especially, pregame, postgame with the boys, but
sure.
But that was kind of it as far as that goes. I do remember getting Take Care, the Drake mixtape, I guess. I got that as a CD at some point. I remember having that in my car. So, but other than that, it was pretty limited.
Awesome. Yeah. I wasn't a huge rap guy until I moved, honestly, down to Atlanta. I mean, I liked it. I dabbled, but it was just stereotypical artists like Drake or Lil Wayne, the artists that everybody loved, or at least knew of. But then when I got down here is when I learned that like almost every single major hip hop artist is from Atlanta. The music is in the city. It almost is like, it's the culture down here, man. It's just hip hop. Like this is a hip hop city, just like I'm sure like LA is a hip hop city. Or Compton, like it's just, you could just like feel it. Like when you're driving, if you roll your windows down and 5 other cars have their windows down, 4 out of those 5 cars are playing some kind of hip hop. It's just it's like a movement.
Yeah. And that's awesome. And I probably, I need to give it a chance. I gotten the Chance, the rapper, for a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I need to give it a full scale. Like I need Dave and Dylan and Will to all give me like 5 songs or 5 artists. and just give it like a full scale run through.
Yeah.
I'm sure I would like it. I just appreciate good music and good lyrics and good concepts in the music.
And you're not wrong for thinking that, because most rap nowadays isn't like 90s rap where they're usually like Eminem or, Ice Cube or, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg. Most of those guys are telling a story with their songs. Nowadays, it's just guys rapping about how much money they have or how many bitches they sleep with, or, what it doesn't. It's just club music.
Right. It's club music, and then a DJ goes and puts a beat over it, and that's the remix, and that goes multi platinum. And like I just it just seems, and some people like rock bands do it sometimes too. You see Green Day will come back with a money grab like EP or something with 4 songs that are all trash, or it's just, I don't know. I'm more into the old stuff, kind of across the board, like old school pop punk, the 90s and early 2000s Blink and Simple Plan, kind of shit like that.
Yeah. Hell yeah, man. I'm gonna give you a recommendation in case you haven't heard them.
Okay.
The band is called the Ataris.
They are.
That's exactly what I was gonna tell you. I was like, bro, I don't know if I'm trash for saying this, but I almost like their version of it better than Don Henley's, even though Don Henley's has a special place. And I think both versions of the song have a time and place, because the Ataris is more, heavy and more punkish, rockish sounding, when Don Henley's is something I'd throw on if I was on a boat or something,
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. There's just like, God, now I'm kind of like Goldfinger and what's the STR something. But yeah, those bands like that were all I listened to. Everybody kind of has that like skater phase.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that was, Blink and
sure.
Golly, all those kinds of bands were definitely a part of the childhood.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, man. It almost seems like we all had the same childhood. We just lived it in different areas. We all listen to the same music. We all love the same shit. But I'm gonna ask you one last real question. Total Dave question, but what's next for Brett and or Washed in 2020? What you got coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing would be to keep an eye out for more content, more people, more personalities, more channels. I don't know if you missed the blogs of PGP's old and columns of TFM.
I've wondered if you guys were going to dive into that kind of stuff, because I know they, the guys wrote columns back in the day, and every once in a while they'll still write something, and I've thought it's going to come back in some fashion.
You may be right sooner than you think. It's one of those things where it's really hard to monetize editorial nowadays, right? Unless you have millions upon millions of page views.
Sure.
It's also really hard to grow podcasts nowadays.
Yes.
But there's a marriage between the two where it's really easy to get eyeballs on your editorial and really easy to monetize podcasts at any scale.
Yeah.
And so if you look at that, there's like an X marks the spot kind of in that situation, where if we can get people reading blogs and reading columns and convert them into podcast listeners like we did, or they did at PGP and with Touch and Base, then you're looking at more business. So
I was just going to say, it almost just sounds like you just described what Will did with Sunday Scaries. Didn't it start out as a blog, and then he was like, wow, I can turn this into something people listen to, but they can also read if they choose to.
100%. Exactly. So keep an eye out for that, maybe end of year-ish or later on. And then just more podcasts. Like, we want to have a female-centric podcast. We want to have, you see some of the podcasts we do on Patreon. Maybe we make those into, their full free kind of their own feed on Apple and Spotify.
Sure.
But just more, I think, is the answer to your question. Just look for more across the board: video, podcast, editorial, shoot radio if we get an opportunity, and look for more stuff of us doing stuff together. Like, we'll go play a round of golf, or we'll go to a beach, or we'll go on another ski trip type of thing, and really turn that into, vlog style content.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess basically more podcasts and more content. I kind of is the plan, and I'm going to try to sell it.
Okay, awesome, man. Do you want to throw any handles, any ads, any plugs? Now's your time to do so.
Yeah, hit me on Twitter and Instagram at Schmerriman, SHMERRIMAN. Check out the folks at Paradox Brewery. We got to get them down in the South. That's my dad's craft brewery up in upstate New York, Screwen Lake area. They don't ship yet, but we're working on it.
Nice.
But yeah, other than that, man, this has been fun.
Yeah, bro. Thanks for doing this. You guys, it's really awesome that you agreed to jump on here. I've listened to y'all's stuff for quite some time, and when you agreed, I've been quite excited to sit down and talk with you. So, man, I'd love to talk or to do, anything in the future if you guys ever are interested, or throw me on a happy hour. I love my air fryer. My roommate and I use our air fryer quite often. So, when you guys started doing the air fryer thing, I was like, oh, these are going to be some lucky winners because it'll change your life.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're hoping for. So, but those have been fun too, man. Just another thing that we kind of was like a throwaway idea that turned into a staple of happy hours is those dinner things. So we enjoy it. But yeah, I mean, we're always open to looking at new content, new people, new personalities, because that's the way this thing is going to blow up is personalities that people can kind of latch on to and grow with.
Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you so much for being here, bro. I really appreciate it. Everybody, hit the links that Brett talked about. Go listen to Wash Media's content, Sunday Scaries, The Mail-In, Circling Back, and Club Cool. Follow us on Instagram, The Binge Boys Podcast. Myself, Logan Lewis 96. This episode will probably drop on, let's see, Thursday. Yeah, let's say Thursday. This will drop Thursday. So everybody have a good weekend. Brett, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Good deal. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bye.